It's been a busy year. It's been a grinding year. And Sam Tall is going to take a look back at what he's covered over the year and what went wrong and what went right, and dip into his crystal ball and see what 2021 has to offer. So let's get to this. 2020 was a mess, or was it? Sam, well, what do you think?
Hey Peter, so
Hey.
it was definitely a mess, but I think there are a couple of bright spots that we can carry with us into the new year.
No bright
Thank God.
spots. I can't see out of this eye right now. This eye has an eye infection, so it's like all the bright spots are really bad. It's a good way to end the year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we can't. I think this was the way that I ended last year a little bit was with this mental sensation of like an airplane skidding down the runway sideways, just barely making it and landing safely. And I feel like the entire world is
Mhm.
ending this year that way, and everyone in it. So I want to run down a couple of things. I spent a lot of time in the last 24 hours watching myself talk, which great for the ego, nitpicking all the things that I said right and wrong, and all the weird mannerisms and all
Mhm.
the stuff. But in any case, there's a couple of things that I think it was very fascinating. You ever like look at photos or videos of yourself from like 10 years ago
Oh yeah.
and be like, ooh, that's grueling, that's embarrassing. How was I ever like that? Well, 7 months ago feels like 10 years ago.
And if you look at like our backgrounds and our production and our audio,
Oh
it was
yeah.
all just completely just like, hey, let's just turn on the computer and go. And now it's like, all right, we have a thing going on. All
I
right,
mean,
so
you didn't even have a green screen. You had like a payphone behind you.
yes, I had. But people miss the payphone. People have asked about the payphone, so I am going to bring it back. I'll have to put it on a stand or something back here.
There we go.
So, all right, Sam, I'll let you ride with this one.
Here we go. So I think the first things first is one of the first things I talked about in early May was kicking the can down the road with live concerts, right? And so we all know the story there. It's probably not, at earliest we're going to get live concerts maybe in the summer, probably more like the fall. And the larger the concert, the later it's going to be before we see that return. My hope was that we would figure out a plan that would let us, take a 3 month look and then every 3 months adjust course. Turns out that didn't really give us enough time to sort things out. And I think we spent way too much time chasing our tail. We collectively, like not only as an industry, but with governments and with states we just spent a lot of time like hoping for a positive thing to come about as opposed to putting aside a determination about when it'll be fine and not actually doing the work about getting it fine. On the bright side, we're seeing a lot of uptake in monetized live stream concerts. I think that's a new thing that, for a few years, there's been conversation about how are we going to monetize live stream concerts? How are we going to make this a compelling experience when we have the real thing as our last sort of like finite resource when music is otherwise infinite and limitless in terms of its access. Well, now we know. I think this year has accelerated a lot of the questions and a lot of the answers corresponding. Whether it's live stream, whether it's adoption of VR and how we meet in VR spaces, how we attend concerts, how we engage with production. I think everyone's a bit of a micro broadcaster now, as we are doing here. This is a primary mechanism of espousing our thoughts as opposed to getting out to networking events, working the room, and kind of philosophizing amongst our peers. We rely on formats like this. I think that's going to stay the same for most of the next year. We'll see if that changes. Fingers crossed that with the vaccines starting to roll out yesterday in the United States and last week in Europe, that it's sooner rather than later. But I think it's going to take quite some time for that to reach the sort of like fullest extent of what it needs to in order for everybody to feel confident. The other thing that I really want to take a second on is the legal sort of landscape. There's a couple of things that happened this year from a legal perspective, especially around streaming royalties, that I think are going to play a significant role in what happens next year. If you recall, we talked about 8 Mile Style This is Eminem's sort of vehicle for containing some of the compositions and master recordings around the film and some other works. And they've been embroiled in a lawsuit with Spotify since August of last year, and it's still ongoing. I checked into that recently and saw that there's a bunch of the normal sort of court filings, this and that, and lawyers doing this and that, but there's very little substance and traction since things changed up in July when 8 Mile Style added Harry Fox Agency to the debacle and made the case that Harry Fox was aiding and abetting Spotify in defrauding 8 Mile Style of its royalties and issuing invalid notices of intent and trying to obtain licenses through the compulsory system that they're not entitled to. The entire system of compulsory licensing and the way that notices of intent or NOIs are issued and the way that Harry Fox Agency factors into the equation of Spotify and other DSPs issuing royalties, monetizing the catalogs, associating with publishers and songwriters is set to change at the beginning of the year. So this 8 Mile Style lawsuit is basically the last thing. It's the last dying breath of the pre-Music Modernization Act industry, where there's sort of like old school rules had to be abided for things to be valid. That's going to go ongoing. I mean, we saw things with David Lowery and the Wixen Publishing lawsuit a couple of years ago. The things that were we thought would be the last thing that happened before the law passed and things changed up with 2018 and going into 2019. Apparently not. And I think this is going to have an impact on Harry Fox's reputation. I predicted that it might completely smack Harry Fox in the face and they might get a broader audit and inquiry. And that just didn't happen. I think Harry Fox Agency, I have my own opinions on them and none of them are too positive. They're sort of a necessary evil in the music industry, but I think they're kind of impervious at this point. And it pains me to say it, but I think that, when the Music Mechanical Licensing Collective goes into operation in the new year and the Music Modernization Act starts to show its actual effects, I think we're just going to see Harry Fox become infrastructure. They're going to become the Con Edison of the music business, in that nobody loves what they do, but they're kind of part and parcel of New York City, and this is going to be part and parcel of the entire music ecosystem, inextricable. And I think that's one of the greatest sort of coups of Harry Fox as an agency in its entirety. And then last, I have one fun little thing for you, Peter. We talked with Jake Knock this year, and we bandied about his Spotify lawsuit and suing the entire music industry, and we made the sort of prediction that Jake would maybe execute some further unscrupulous legal behaviors and try to just drum up attention for his own businesses, and then maybe potentially parlay that into actual legitimate business operations with Pro Music Rights. And, it's generally not a bad idea. It's sort of a TuneCoreization of the PRO model. Except that Jake has done some more fishy things. So recently in the Artist Managers Connect Facebook group, Jake was very proud of the fact that he settled some suits that then resulted in an option to acquire shares of Pro Music Rights, PMR, by some other companies that he had allegedly been in private arguments and lawsuits with, and arbitration and whatnot else, and transacted in the amount of some $600 million. The fact of the matter is it's all paper. It's not even money. It's just options. It's things that don't have to get exercised. It's not even sure if the suits are real. And frankly, every sign points to the fact that Jake owns these companies that he was suing or in a lawsuit against. Look, Jake, if you're out there, I know you listen to this show. I know you watch the videos sometimes, and I know you're part of the community. I don't know what you're doing. I don't know what you think this is going to get you, but I just don't. I can't see it playing out well, bud. It smacks me of somebody who's just really trying to make a name for themselves by any means necessary, and there are more honorable ways. I don't think this is going to make a power player. I think this is going to make a noisy jester in the court. and I think, once 2021 kind of picks back up with live music and performing rights, and we maybe see some more lawsuits against promoters who are failing to account when that's not even their business, for performing rights royalties. If anything, it'll be entertaining, to watch. I'll save my bit about the parliamentary inquiry into music streaming. I think that still has a long ways to go, but if anybody remembers me talking about user-centric payment models, I think that's coming, and we'll probably talk more about that once we see some responses to that in the new year. And that's my perspective.
Right on. Yeah. Yeah, so much there, and I love the fact like going back in time in the Wayback Machine. So let's work reverse chronologically, because I do have a couple questions about 2020. So the UK parliamentary, we're going to be covering that quite a bit going into starting in January, and we're going to bring in some guests who are over in the UK, so they're really seeing it, they're being part of it. So we're going to bring in some great guests on that. The Jake story. And again, like there was one thing you said, it's like you don't know if it's just paper money, because there was one thing that was that really stuck out in one of the sentences is, here's the legal suit, and they can collect the options if they choose.
Yeah.
Which means they don't have to exercise it. Yeah. They don't have to exercise this. And yes, he does own the two companies. He's chairman and CEO of the two companies that he sued. So,
oh Jesus,
I don't know.
We love to just kind of like, I mean, look, I hate to pick on somebody, and it's just, it's so bizarre. For somebody making so much noise to have so little backing it. And look, I would have held my tongue a little tighter probably earlier this year, but now it's just like, it's so ridiculous.
Well, we had him on, and it was like, here, let's hear your story, because I'm all for people that are going to fight for songwriters' rights.
Sure.
And songwriters' rights, like, yeah, so like let's come together and let's support it. But when like you see something like this, it's like it loses credibility within the industry to take you serious on that. Like, yeah, let's have another PRO. Let's do something. Let's, new, I'm so like, what, like, I can't even think of words right now, but it's like, to support each other and like, yeah, like, let's do this. But like when you start seeing this, and this is what's being promoted as opposed to what the organization does.
I feel like there was an opportunity to kind of be a next gen Jeff Price. A firebrand, a true fighter, a highly principled person who lives and breathes, artist rights and artist royalties. And, say what anyone will about Jeff, is the fact is that he is dedicated to a true honorable cause, and it's probably at some points to his credit and some points to his detriment, but you can't fault him for trying so hard and being so rigid about his position and being really honorable in that respect. Yeah. And Jake is just like, he's aping the sort of attitude of it without actually doing anything on the backside of it. And it's just like, look, there's an opportunity for him to turn this around, and I hope he does. I'm happy to talk to him about it and happy to even like work with him to kind of make that the case, because again, I think artist rights and user-centric payments and all this kind of stuff is super, super key to the next level of the music industry. But it's all for show.
Yeah. And that's not the music industry likes a good show put on by a performance. They don't like the dog and pony show, because the music industry is so accustomed to bullshit that it's like you can smell it, walking us. It's like, and we all know, and we know who the snake oil salesmen are, and we all know that. And it's like, so it's kind of like, all right, but it is really the business that gets done. It's really, there is that honorable business side to it. So real quick then, before we go over to the Duke, 2021, what is on your radar?
So I think the UK parliamentary inquiry is going to set up a lot of things in other countries, perhaps the European Parliament as a whole, perhaps US Congress. I think that's going to become more clear once we get on the other side of the Georgia Senate runoffs, and which way the Congress is going to lean. One thing's for sure is that we're hopefully and very probably at this point, it seems like it's increasingly the case, going to spend the next 4 years as bored as possible with government. That would be a great change. So on that front, I think there's going to be a lot less discussion of how government action impacts the music industry and a lot more operating in the music industry on a set of rules that don't really change that much because, frankly, we're all a little tired of change and unpredictability and things kind of shifting under our feet. That would be, in my opinion, probably the best case at this point. And it seems likely that we're going to get a little bit of that stability, and boredom is not a bad thing. I think we can all agree on that now at this point. And again, I said this about when I was referencing my take on Live Nation and concerts and all that stuff. Live Nation had enough capital to weather the storm. We're seeing Mark Geiger, who acquired a bunch of stakes, or at least put together a fund to acquire a bunch of stakes in small venues, and that I think is going to become another counterweight to Live Nation and AEG, which is well needed, especially at that bracket, to recover the sort of starting line of the music industry. The base level, the introduction, the club scene is super, super key. I'm holding out hope for that. I think there's mixed opinion, but I think once the club shows return, maybe late summer, early fall, fingers crossed, I think we're going to see a lot of talk about how right or wrong Mark Geiger was. I'm leaning towards right